Welcome back to the Biz Apps Classroom. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com, and on this episode, my co-host Julie Yak and I are chatting about events and the role in building your skills. We talk about the types of educational content that Julie sees gaining popularity at Microsoft-focused events, how sessions are selected, and how to get the most out of the next event that you choose to spend your time at. Some of the other things we cover on this episode: Julie provides an update on the planning for the next Power Platform 24 virtual event on March 20th and 21st, and their call for speakers. We also talk about my recent trip to the NRF Big Show 2024 event, how to balance structure and spontaneity in your event schedule, and whether session selection teams are doing a better job encouraging a diverse range of presenters to get involved in their events.
So, Jason, you just got back from NRF something show?
I did. The NRF Big Show. It's an annual retail industry event run by the National Retail Federation. It's a really big industry event. It's really different for me than the typical event I tend to cover, which is sort of within the Microsoft ecosystem. This is the retail industry broadly across the US and really internationally. It's a big international event. A lot of languages spoken, retailers from all different types of companies that are pure retail, companies that just have a retail component to them. A lot of technology in play at the event. Microsoft is one of the real top tier sponsors, and that's really why I have been drawn to it over the years. I think I've gone 5 or 6 times. So there's a lot of Microsoft technology there, a lot of Microsoft representatives there, and they're really putting their best foot forward when it comes to Dynamics, Power Platform, Azure, all the rest, all focused on what it can do for retailers. So it can be a really interesting perspective from my point of view. And I usually get at least a couple of interesting tidbits to report on. So yeah, I went back this year. I hadn't been in a couple of years.
So is it your typical conference, like tech conference that we've been going to for ages, where you've got breakout sessions and learning stuff? Is it a big expo hall? Set the scene for us.
Yeah, this is really different in the sense that it really focuses around the expo hall to a large extent and to the exhibitors. I think a lot of retailers go there looking for what the latest and greatest technology is and what they could potentially invest in to improve or modernize or stay competitive in their space. What it doesn't, and it does have some side events focused on manufacturing or focused on supply chain, I should say, or focusing on some other topics. There's emerging companies there. But it is really not like your typical Microsoft Business Applications community event where there's a lot of, really specific learning to be done for most of the attendees, I would say. There's some of that, but less than you would think. I think more likely you're going to go and watch a lot of demos, see a lot of proofs of concept, or get educated on sort of what different vendors have to offer in the expo hall. So it's that kind of learning and less so the kind of learning that has to do with, I would say, skills, career, projects, that kind of stuff.
So it sounds like an event about selling things to people who sell things.
Yeah. If you, it's funny because everyone understands what retail is, right? We all live with retail in our lives, but seeing the people who work in that industry sort of approach things is kind of unique because they are all thinking about how they sell more. And, the expo there is all about selling to the sellers, right?
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of event, but the events that we typically go to are more around learning about doing your job better.
Right. It's a big departure. NRF's a big departure for me. It's a fun change of pace. It's a fun, different perspective, but it is really different from what we tend to think about in the Dynamics ecosystem or in the Microsoft ecosystem.
So with those Microsoft and Dynamics events, there's always something to learn. How do you decide what you want to learn at a conference?
Yeah, I'm probably a bit atypical because I go to events thinking of it from a press or media perspective and what I can write about more than how I can personally learn new skills for my job. And so I guess that makes me a little different from the ordinary attendee. But I remember what that's like. I've certainly been in that role as well, going to events to learn and to do my job better. So I try to think about that as well. That gets really hard though, because you really have to start thinking about how to optimize the time you have there, how much kind of effort and attention you can put on different topics, right? So that's where I think the challenge lies when you attend an event, really to build your skills, to advance your knowledge. What do you think?
Well, and I think that it's tough sometimes knowing if it's going to be the right event for you. Some of the times you just have to go based on the reputation that, but great, I'm going to sign up now, and months from now when the sessions have been selected, when I, have identified what I might want to learn, I have to put faith in the system that there's going to be something there for me to learn. And sometimes that's tough.
Yeah, it's certainly an area where you have to sort of be able to justify it both to yourself and probably to your team if you're not the decision maker, why you should be traveling to some in-person event as opposed to learning all year, or learning in stages as part of your daily, weekly, monthly efforts that you're doing anyway, right? So there's certainly some decisions to make and some justifications to make in those cases.
And there are so many different events available. And right now, there seems to be this massive push toward beginner content and maybe kind of going into intermediate content. And those particular members of our audience don't always know what they don't know and don't know how to pick what they should be attending.
That's really interesting. I would actually have thought the opposite. It's not something I had really looked at carefully, I guess, before we started talking here today. But I would have thought people are more likely nowadays to get that base level of training on their own so that they could go and do more advanced things with great trainers in front of them, and having sort of taken the extra time and expense to be on site somewhere. But you're saying that's not really the case.
Well, I think the true beginner, I've never worked in technology, but someone told me I could do this and it looks interesting person has to have some kind of base knowledge before they go in, or they won't be able to succeed. But that a lot of the content being gap filling content, whereas I may know something about model driven apps and I may be used to old school workflows coming from the legacy dynamic CRM area. But now there's Power Automate, and Power Automate does all these cool things. And I need to learn more about Power Automate from a beginner perspective, and then how to backfill it into the knowledge I have.
In those cases, I mean, who do you see kind of supporting those efforts? Is it employers, or do you see it as sort of people making their own personal decisions to invest in themselves?
I think it's probably some of each. I think that it's important for employers to keep their folks educated and appreciated. And part of that appreciation is continued professional development, that if you treat your people well, they'll stay regardless of the temptations at other employers. And part of that is making sure that they can continue to grow and offering them those opportunities at things like conferences. Thousands of people go to these conferences all the time.
Professional development it's hard to, I guess, put a value on that when you're kind of giving that, offering that to an employee, as long as it's something that they feel is worth their time as well.
Well, and with so many events, how do you pick? So
Yeah.
Let's see. How many events can we quickly name?
I think I can do about 5 offhand.
Okay, go ahead.
So we have Power Platform 24 virtual event. We have Dynamics Con 2024, Dynamics Minds, Directions North America. That's 4, I guess. I would then say, Directions EMEA, which is further into the fall. I know that one's coming up, so I'll put that in. I guess 6 would be a summit event from Dynamics Communities. I'm sure that's coming up in the fall as well.
And then we've got Ignite
from
Microsoft.
Yeah, Ignite.
Which saw more Biz Apps coverage this past year than I've ever seen before. But and there's all these community events that happen all the time, user groups, and it's just so much learning going on.
Yeah, and it's with virtual events, the barriers have never been lower from a technical or sort of executive perspective. That you can put one on. I mean, that doesn't say anything about the quality, of course, but that can happen. Just a couple others I thought of: Fabric Community Conference, which is a brand new one, is really focused on Microsoft Fabric, but will kind of ties into Dynamics, and probably will
Right.
more so coming up.
There's a Canadian Power Platform conference. Call for speakers closed yesterday. There's talk of one in Australia. All of
Hmm.
these in-person conference events that are 1 to 4 days, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's not counting events run by a particular partner, particular ISV, which sometimes are also great events. Those just can tend to be a little smaller or not quite as visible.
So let's say you've decided to go to Jason and Julie's conference. How can we help people decide what sessions to go to?
That's a great question. So yeah, my first thought would be, well, there's a few dimensions, right? There's the relevant products from the sort of Microsoft sort of product lineup. Which products is it relevant to? I think then there's the, what kind of roles is it for? Is it for developers? Is it for administrators, power users, someone else, regular users, right? And then I think within that, it gets into certain skills or certain tasks. So is it accounting, department by department, or by skill if you're talking development, if it's people who care about security or who care about coding, or who care about database development. Those are kind of dimensions I would think. So it's really a matter of sort of winnowing down into those more fine-grained attributes.
And several of these conferences have evolved over the years. So, like Dynamics Con that you mentioned, I believe their background came from Business Central, and they have evolved to cover more of the biz apps. And then Dynamic Communities. They cover all aspects of biz apps, Power Platform, Dynamics, and so on. But the reality is, when you're there, it's much more an F&O focused event than a CRM focused event. And so taking that into consideration with what you're looking to learn is kind of important.
Yeah, I think you could point to almost any of these events. Some of them are very specific on purpose. Directions North America is going to be sort of SMB ERP focused, with some CRM as well and some Power Platform, but really a Business Central heritage there and an SMB focus. So that's pretty clear, and you sort of know exactly what you're getting in that regard. But like you said, I mean, other events, they just tend to, based on their heritage or whatever, they'll have be sort of overweight in one product, or a much more robust presence, I guess you would say, on one product area, less on another, or more technical, less technical, something like that. Just sort of seems like the nature of how these events tend to form and build. And then that reflects, I guess, the variety or the depth of content in any one area at any one event.
Right. Can they attract the right speakers to deliver the right topics?
Right, right. And then I see anyway, if I'm sort of talking to these event teams behind the scenes, that they're always they usually know where they need to, or where they want to build out a better presence, or better content. And they're always working to do that. It's a real challenge though. I mean, you see it all the time that these organizers know they want to get stronger in, CE customization. I'm just making that up, but then it's a matter of actually making that happen, and building that enthusiasm or momentum, awareness that there's a need for those kinds of people that they want to see at their event, and then they have to work for it.
Well, and I've helped with a ton of different events. I'm one of the folks leading the drive for Power Platform 24, but I've helped with session selection for nearly all of the conferences that we named. And either help with the session selection, help make referrals, submitted sessions and delivered there, or so on. But like with Power Platform 24, I'm happy to share our process. We put a call for speakers. We have people that we trust in our industry use the built-in tools with the Sessionize system, where they evaluate and rank the sessions. We typically have anywhere between 3 and 4 times the number of sessions submitted than we need. And so we start with, great, it's a 24-hour conference. We need 24 sessions. Let's start in order of those with the best ratings. And we go through each one in order from top ranked to number 24 and say, is this a good session? Is this for our audience? Do we know the speaker? Are they reliable? So on. Let's see if we don't know the speaker. Let's look at their LinkedIn profile. Let's look at their presence. Who do we know that they might know? And so on. And we just go straight down from the sessions and how they were evaluated. And then once we get to 24 sessions, we'll be evaluating, great. Have we found ourselves a naturally diverse set of speakers? Sometimes we do. Most times we do actually incidentally become a very diverse set of speakers. And if not, is there a diverse speaker who is qualified that has submitted that can cover a topic for us? Is there a specific topic that we're missing? Do we not have any sessions on Power Pages, or we have nothing on Advanced Power Automate? Okay, so who do we know that could give a talk based on that topic that we've identified as one that's missing, and fill in the gaps to give the best 24-hour sessions? And then there's always the time zone consideration, because it is 24 straight hours. We try to make sure that people are presenting in a time zone that is reasonable for them. That's not 3 o'clock in the morning, their local time.
Yeah, that's interesting. What you were saying about trying to, provide a diversified group of people, not so that everyone doesn't look the same, everyone doesn't sound the same. They come from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, different geographical places in the course of an event like Power Platform 24. And I think you were saying that tends to work out pretty well just based on the submissions and the selection process, but that you do keep it in mind. And I've seen that at other events too, that when events have planned that they're committed to that, I think something about that sort of comes through in the call for submissions, and it perhaps tends to encourage a broader range of people to participate or to submit. Because in experiences where I've seen organizers make that effort, they didn't have to go out and make extra efforts to, make calls for, they end up saying it's just too homogenous or anything like that, at least in my experience.
Well, representation matters. To be able to see yourself in someone you admire based on their professional accomplishments helps motivate you to want to do those things or your own things at that level. And representation matters.
How do you know if you're attending an event, maybe let's say while you're at it or coming away from it, that you know that you're really sort of getting out of the event? I think certainly, looking to who's presenting and sort of the what they have to offer in terms of their teaching style and the material they're presenting matters. I don't know. Do you ever find that attendees are going at it the wrong way? They're taking the wrong strategy. They're perhaps not coming away with what they were hoping for. Or if that does happen, I don't know. Do you have any advice for people who are worried that they're going to miss something?
I think the only bad strategy is no strategy. That as long as you have taken at least a little bit of time to evaluate the available sessions, maybe see if there's 2 or 3 sessions together that would benefit you individually, that as long as you've taken the time to make a strategy and evaluate and make a plan, then I think you can be successful. Some of these big 3-day conferences with 15,000 people, you'll drown if you don't have some kind of plan.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I can think of as you were saying that is, I think you should hold conferences to a high standard, though, for if it's, whether it's the sessions themselves at the event or whether it's sort of extra additional sort of paid training that you sort of purchase in addition to your standard ticket. I'm always happy to hear when people sort of hold the organizer sort of to the right standard. And I think most want to be held to it, that, if a particular trainer, has an issue, or if a session is not run or doesn't present its material the way you expect it or something like that, I certainly encourage people to also speak up, because I know that organizers tend to take that stuff seriously. And if they don't, I think it's certainly a bit of a red flag.
Right, but also take it with a grain of salt. So I delivered a session at one of the big events several years ago, and it was I want to say level 75, not even level 100, introduction to forms and CRM. And the abstract was very specifically written that if you have any experience, this is not the session for you. If you're brand new, this is for you. I opened the session and put up a slide that said, who in here has done these 3 things? And anybody who raised their hand, I'm like, you're overqualified. You're not going to learn anything. You should go find another session, right? I was very specific about it. And I got feedback that said it was too simple of a session. And so I don't know how much more clear I could have been. So look for red flags, but keep that in mind when you're doing the evaluations and reviewing that feedback.
Yeah, I mean, the only other kind of training that I think is always a really interesting one that you see at conferences, especially, is when ISVs will sort of lead their training at an event. And I know it's a different sort of thing, but that always seems like a really valuable one in a few ways. In the same way that users need to be trained on the skills they need to use a dynamic solution, a Power Platform, to do work with Power Platform. If your company has purchased especially a more significant ISV solution to augment your business applications from Microsoft, I mean, knowing those add-on solutions inside and out is hugely valuable. And I've always thought that made a lot of sense. I've often wondered why more ISVs don't do that at some of these dynamics-focused conferences.
Yeah, I agree that it's a great opportunity for both an ISV perspective and an attendee perspective.
I mean, it can be a lot of work to to put those on or to plan ahead for it. I think a lot of ISVs tend to be running in a lot of different directions to try to.
Users can tell if you're trying to sell them something or if you're trying to teach them something, and that's a tough line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you need the right kind of people with the right kind of training skills, or to have partnered with other people who are qualified to do it. So it's certainly its own challenge.
So getting back to how to learn at a conference, how to come away with the best possible results for yourself if you're spending your time, your boss's money, what could event planners do to make it easier to figure out what you should be learning? Do you have any thoughts?
I would, I think if I was an event organizer, I'd be listening to the experts. I mean, I think most event organizers are typically good at organizing, but they're not typically the ones who know best when it comes to what the attendees should be learning. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm going to suggest that any event that happens in this calendar year that has, tracks to choose from, that's not using AI to help their attendees pick their sessions, is not serving their attendees. They're serving their bank accounts.
So you want to see AI recommendations for
Yes.
attendees?
Yes.
All right.
I want to have an event co-pilot to help me build my agenda of things that I'm going to go to while I'm there.
All right, very interesting. I think that's not far off for a lot of these firms. I don't know if you're foreshadowing that you know that is on the horizon for perhaps.
No. I've not seen or heard anything. There's been talks here about how we could better use AI at 365.training. We've got several pieces that we're doing now with AI, but how can we better serve people to help them find what they should be learning? But from a conference perspective, I could almost write that co-pilot in my head.
Right. Yep. Just to tie things back to that NRF event that I was just at, yes. I sat in on a Microsoft session there, and one of the things they really wanted to show off for retailers was the ability to sort of ask your your retail app on your phone. I'm planning an event for I'm planning a 12-year-old's birthday, and he really likes golf. What should I buy? What should be on my party planning list? And, that's the kind of thing that they want to see more retailers doing, which is a bit of an analogous, I would say, to I'm going to this Power Platform conference, and I really need to, learn about controls or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Which sessions should I attend? Give me the
Right.
list and let me sign up for those.
I have beginner level knowledge on this topic, and I need to learn more about this topic. Great. Here are 3 sessions that will help you.
I think there will always be at these in-person conferences, there's some element of it where there's a bit of buzz, or there's a bit of sort of word of mouth that you're always going to want to try to pay attention to, not to be sort of, looking at a co-pilot telling you where to go and just following that, because that's a bit of the magic of, being around other people who like the same, or who do the same work as you, hopefully like it too. But yeah, certainly for the bulk of your planning, I could see that really helping.
So what's next up for you in events? What's your next one you're going to attend?
That's a great question. I think it might be the Fabric Community Conference, just in terms of dates, which is coming up in a couple months. I think I mentioned it earlier, right? It's a new event with a lot of support from Microsoft, which makes it pretty interesting, and the Fabric team there. And so it's going to be all about that technology and where it ties into Power BI, and probably where it ties into, to some extent, business applications built on a Microsoft data foundation. So I think that's calendar-wise, that's probably the next in-person one.
Next up for me is MVP Summit. And then I have back-to-back Dynamics Con and Dynamics Minds in May.
All right, great. I thought, so MVP Summit is still coming up this year.
Yes, it's in March.
It hasn't happened yet. Oh, it's in March. Okay. I always have trouble tracking that because it's sort of one of those, it's a private conference essentially.
Right.
For MVPs, I always lose track of it. But but then all of a sudden I realize I can't reach any MVPs, and that's typically why, I suppose.
Because we're all locked in a room with no windows.
Right. And your mouth's taped shut now, or your hands tied behind your back or something.
Yes.
So you won't report it. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Well, I guess for anyone listening, best of luck in planning your training for the next event that you plan to go to. Maybe we should have listeners let us know how they like to plan, what they look for when they're planning their events.
Yes, that would be awesome. And then have a look at Power 24 to see what it is you're going to learn next. We're actively seeking submissions, but the event is virtual and it's 24 hours. So no matter where you are, there's something happening in your time zone. You can find out more about it at 365link/Power24, and we'll put that link in the show notes.
Absolutely. And that is truly a 24-hour sort of endurance event. Not that everyone has to be there the whole time, but that is the format, and that's what you've stuck with for quite a few years now, right?
Yeah, I think this will be our 6th or 7th one that we're doing. And we were doing it definitely pre-COVID, so that's all we've done.
It is a fun one. I'll definitely tend to try to jump in and out as I can. Yeah, Julie, thanks again for being here for another episode of the Biz Apps Classroom. Anything else you want to add? Anything else going on over at your site, or anything else that you're working on?
No, I think we're just getting excited for a great 2024 with events happening all the time. And I think I have 4 or 5 different flights booked in advance, and it's almost like old times again.
Well, I look forward to chatting with you again soon, Julie. Thanks.
Yes, take care, Jason.
And that's it for this episode of the Biz Apps Classroom. Thanks for being here. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach Julie by email, julie@365.training. You can reach me, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. And we look forward to seeing you back here in the Biz Apps Classroom very soon.